So as my colleague tells me that we can already start, so good evening, everyone. I am Ashkan Grigorian, Executive Director with Digital Communication Network. I'm happy to welcome you today and to our monthly thematic webinar series, this time in September, headlined Corruption Investigations based on Big Data and Corruption. So Digital Communication Network has designed several series during this year. Since the beginning of the year, we had a series of monthly virtual discussions on combating disinformation through video games. And September thematic month, we have designed to talk about the corruption which erodes democratic societies, and it produces a vicious circles. And this is a problem that in different countries on different levels societies are facing. I am happy to have with me today Aisha from Jordan, who is an investigative journalist from OCCRP, and she's going to be your moderator and host today. So I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Aisha and let this event start. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Ashkan. I'm Aisha. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. I'm myself really excited to meet and talk to these journalists. Kyrgyzstan and some of the investigations that have come out of their region and that they themselves have participated in have been incredible. And they've pioneered, I know because I work at OCCRP, some really groundbreaking techniques in using open data to do very strong and hard-hitting investigations. So I hope they'll chat to us about that and reveal to us maybe a few of their secrets. So without further ado, I'd like to start by introducing Altanay Mambetova, who founded the School of Data in Kyrgyzstan. It's a sort of an organization that pioneered and really founded the practice of data journalism in the country. So Altanay, could you please talk to us about briefly about how you did that and what that meant to you?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here, and today I'm going to talk about the challenges we faced while starting developing data journalism in the region of Central Asia, and our strategies and programs we implement, and how we support journalists, and how we support the whole data ecosystem. I've prepared a small presentation, and let me share.
And Altanay, I'm glad to have a presentation, but my job, at least as far as I've been told, is to challenge you guys with a few new questions. So if you would, keep it a little short, and then we'll move on to getting into the meat of things.
Sure. You can stop me at any time, and I'll be happy to answer your questions or participate in the discussion.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Cool. Let's see.
Just a small presentation to introduce what we're doing and how we're working overall. So, can you see my presentation?
We can see you.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we are School of Data, and we're developing data journalism and data literacy in Central Asia and beyond. And of course, while working, we face few challenges, and like the development of data journalism hasn't been smooth at all. And here are the few challenges we face. And we face different challenges, technical and in the newsrooms. And for instance, challenges we face in newsrooms is that journalists, unfortunately, don't study statistics or math at their universities. And by that, I mean some journalists even choose journalism because they think there's no math and there's no like statistics. So that's the And while working with data, it's like numbers, and we're working with statistics all the time, every day. And the other challenge is that most of the newsrooms are not agile. So they have a certain strategy on how to find news and how to write news, and they're following the steps. And it means that while we're working, and I mean the classic way of doing journalism, asking one question from one expert, then finding another expert saying the other thing, and writing a balanced story. That's how they were taught to do journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And doing data journalism is actually a different strategy. You are asking these questions from the data, and you're analyzing it yourself and producing a unique story. So that's how we work differently, and most of the newsrooms are not agile towards this strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there are like not only this kind of challenges, but also technical. The level of quality of data in Central Asia is in non-unified formats, and it comes in different formats. Sometimes it comes like PDF reports, it comes in Word documents, and we, as a data journalist, we have to deal with all this, with all these things, and we have to like find a normal like machine readable format so we can work with it and get something out of it. And the other technical challenge is the low level of digital literacy. Even like access to internet is not possible in many regions, and many journalists, they don't have proper computers, they don't have proper access to programs so they can work and work with data, get it, scrape it, and somehow analyze it and produce a data journalism story. So these are the challenges we face overall.
Mm-hmm.
And why it's important for journalists to use data. And with the technologies, of course, with the advances of technologies, the role of journalists has changed. And we try to convince journalists that now that everybody can be a journalist, actually, and now that with the social media, the only thing that is left for journalists is data. And a bunch of stories are waiting to get uncovered by journalists.
Mm-hmm.
And more data means more stories, and more stories means more ways to engage audience, actually. And data gives like a lot of opportunities in this way, and instruments as well coming out like every day almost.
Alton, I actually let me throw in a question here. I wanted to ask you. You know, as a journalist, I think when people say open data, it's a big word. We all love it these days. For me, I feel like I'm always learning about new kinds of data. And, you know, I think of it usually as like company records were traditional, or maybe trade statistics. But can you tell me, because you've really had such deep experience with this, what kinds of data do people miss? How big can open data get? What is open data really? What kind of open data exists that people don't think about?
To be honest, I don't like the term big data, actually, while referring to data journalism, because I think many people, they don't understand the scope of big data itself, because what journalists actually do, and where the great stories are lying, they are lying within the small data, actually. It's like the actual data that is available at the open data portals we have. At the government is the biggest holder of the data. And all the data which is about the people in our countries, in our societies, it lies within the term of open data. And what open data means is machine readable format, available for everyone, and available for any kind of change. You know, we can work and produce something out of it. And this data lies just within a couple of clicks, and it's really important to kind of conquer this barrier in the heads of journalists and people, that it's hard to work with data, because we're not working with huge data which is in terabytes. We're working with a couple of spreadsheets, and we're trying to analyze what is the percentage of people are developing this disease, and how it's getting, like, if the situation is getting better or worse over the years, and what are the causes for that, and everything. It lies within the small data, because 1 terabyte of data, we really need people who can actually work with this terabyte, and we really need machines, which can hold this data. And most of the journalists in our countries, they don't have such techniques, they don't have such machines. And it's really important to first popularize data literacy and digital literacy in our region.
It sounds like what you're also saying is that journalists can look for stories in smaller places and actually find things that are really insightful, hospital records or environmental statistics. It doesn't have to be a massive leak that you've obtained.
Exactly. And it's just important to build this dialogue between people who produce data and people who use data, because we are working for one goal. If there is more data being produced and nobody's using it, it means it has nothing to do for the people. And if like a lot of people can work with data, but no data is being produced, it also creates a problem, and it doesn't help to develop data literacy in the community. So it's really important actually to build this dialogue between data producers and data users. And by that, actually, I mean that I mean, all this audience include this data ecosystem, include government officials, stats departments who are producing a lot of data. Civil society, NGOs, journalists, universities are important, researchers, and international organizations. So it's like a huge cycle of data being produced and getting demand on data, and stories being and research results being like communicated to the wider audience.
So this is fascinating, and I love this phrase, developing a data ecosystem. That's something I haven't thought of before, but I think it's really well said. I want to just to keep us moving, I want to move on to Bektur a little bit, our next speaker. So Bektur Iskender co-founded Kloop, which is this award-winning and really amazing investigative outlet. And he's worked on, not only has he sort of founded this investigative outlet, but he's actually worked on a lot of tools to help journalists make their investigations better. So neural networks, video analysis, and others. Bektur, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself, and maybe also, I thought Altanay gave a great answer, but if you could add to her answer of what is open data, where can we look for open data that journalists don't usually think about, and what has your experience taught you about really brilliant uses of data to uncover important public truths?
Hi, thank you very much, Aisha. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm just a very small part of Kloop. And to be honest, I'm not responsible for the development of the majority of the tools that we have developed. We have quite a big team right now, and everybody contributed something. I think every one of us prepared some presentations, so let me just quickly show you something which will actually be the answer to your question.
What can you learn from Kirti's journalism? Great.
Yes, and the first story that I wanted to share, it is actually an answer to what are the sudden places where you can find data. And this is the story of one of our most famous investigations, which was about manipulations at the presidential elections in Kyrgyzstan in 2017, when basically the source of data that we relied upon was the history. Sorry, I will skip all these slides because I don't.
They're great slides, but yeah.
Was the data about the website which hosted a very suspicious system, which was basically a system that recorded all the bribes that were given to voters.
Wait, how did you find this website?
Well, there was a leak.
Okay.
One person leaked information about this website to journalists. But what was more important is to actually, to find proof that actually the website existed and that it had links to the government. And we found these links through digital forensics, through using this sort of data, which is actually open. It's just difficult to get it. The historical records of domain names and stuff like that. It's possible, totally possible. And our digital forensics basically led to the evidence that this suspicious website was hosted on the government server, which was a huge scandal in Kyrgyzstan then, which basically proved that the government was behind bribing voters.
That's great.
So yeah, you can find like this. Another very important point that I wanted to make is that local stories are not really that local. One of the most famous investigations that we published together with, some advertisement of Kyrgyzstan, actually visit our country. It's really beautiful,
Okay.
And so one of the most famous investigations was about smuggling ring that probably still operates in Kyrgyzstan, which transports goods from China to Central Asia through Kyrgyzstan. At the same time bribing our officials, and they bribed our customs service. And this investigation was done jointly by us, OCCRP, and Radio Liberty. And in Kyrgyzstan, people were outraged by it, and in Kyrgyzstan, people were mostly outraged by the participation of our government officials. And this is one of the protests in Bishkek, which was against the corruption. And this protest was immediately after the investigation was published. But what is even more important is, this image. So this is a California mansion that was purchased by the head of the mafia, Habibullah Abdulkadir, who was actually the head of this whole gang that was, transporting these goods. And they earned a lot of money in Kyrgyzstan. And suddenly the story is not local anymore. Suddenly, we see how it influences life and how it corrupts other countries, which are as far from Kyrgyzstan as the US is, or they also bought property in Germany, in UK, in United Arab Emirates. So that's why I'm really happy that we have people from outside of Kyrgyzstan today joining us, because that's a very important point that I wanted to tell everybody, that what we do in Kyrgyzstan, we actually investigate the root of dirty money, which then go into your countries probably. That's why it's totally in interest of everybody to have strong investigative journalism in countries like Kyrgyzstan. Anyway, now talking about tools, and I just wanted to show you 4 kind of directions of tools that we've been using at CLOP. I will keep. So first of all, tools to collect information. That's something that we've been working with for quite a while. These are mostly tools which help us to gather enormous amount of data from open sources, like open government sources, government contracts and so on, but also sometimes unexpected stuff, like, for example, this series of stories about Instagram and how suddenly there were many accounts in Instagram that started defending former President Jan Bekov. And we, in this case, we scraped Instagram comments from Kyrgyz media outlets that have Instagram accounts, managed to basically analyze, a huge amount of Instagram comments. And so sometimes you can find, interesting data stories from stuff like this. Then we've been using tools that allow us to merge databases and find out something completely new. And I will not elaborate on that because we have amazing Katya Reznikova, who will actually tell the story about this investigation, which we found out of blue, no leaks, nothing. We just analyzed data and suddenly found incredible story. But Katya will tell more about it later. Tools to analyze tons of video. That's very important because sometimes we get thousands of hours of video. Like for example, we at Cloak, we record the broadcast of all the major TV channels in Kyrgyzstan, and you have enormous amount of video. And analyzing video is difficult, but fortunately there are now tools which allow us to do incredible stuff. Like for example, this project which we did, which is shown on the screen, it allowed us to monitor the content of the public broadcasting in Kyrgyzstan and to basically understand which people are shown more. And in theory, this TV should be, as balanced as possible because it is funded by taxpayers, but in reality, it is biased crazily, in favor of the government.
I actually want to. Sorry, let me back up. I've never heard of that before. I've never heard of video analysis, and I'm really impressed by it. Is this a code that you wrote yourself or that your journalist wrote, or is it available? Can other journalists, other people in this room adapt this for use in their countries?
Yeah, people can adapt this. Actually, the tools that we used for this, they are available. I mean, there are even open source tools which allow you to work with video. It just requires some expertise, I guess. So, what really helps Cloak is that we now have both journalists and programmers within the organization. And that really made us so much stronger. And I think this is where many media probably go to, and all the media outlets should really start investing into having programmers too. And then when we have this amazing combination, and then when they start working together, that might bring amazing results like this. Because this technique has been used by many industries. The problem is that journalists, unfortunately, have not been using it as much yet, but it's going that way. And I'm very happy that we are one of the pioneers of using that. So whoever is interested, drop me a line. We are ready to tell people how to do that. And the last thing, and again, I'm not gonna elaborate on that because Gulzar is gonna tell more details about it. But these are our tools for crowdsourcing, for using big number of people. A lot of people would all gather some sort of data. Data generated by us, basically. And we especially used this during elections, and we had so many elections in Kyrgyzstan during last year, and because we had our own observers mission. But Gulzar is actually part of the team who works at this observer mission, and she will tell more about how we use it. But also this tool requires, of course, having a lot of people, but at the same time, because of the technology that we use, makes it very easy to collect a lot of data from many people and then to analyze it even in real time. So yeah, basically that's the end of my presentation. I think I set a record.
Let's actually, that takes us right to Gulzara, and I'll introduce her. So yes, as Bektur mentioned, we'll have now Gulzara present a bit. She's a journalist with Cloak, who's overseen basically this pioneering, well, she'll have to tell us more about it, but a pioneering crowdsourcing project to analyze potential fraud or election irregularities in Kyrgyzstan. That's my understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong. But Gulzara, as you present, also tell us, how did you come up with the idea for this? And do you and your colleagues see other applications for large projects in crowdsourcing open data?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
All right. Well, I'm gonna answer your questions soon, but I want to start with a little description. So it's election day, and 30 people between the ages of 18 and 23 are sitting in the office and coordinating around like 3,000 of people across the country. An observer from a very distant region calls and says that he's not allowed inside the polling station. Then, like a 20-year-old verifier who studied the whole electoral system in a month confidently convinces a 50-year-old member of the Electoral Commission with the years of experience how he violates the rights of our observers. And in the end, the member of the commission gives up and lets our observers inside. Perhaps this is the easiest and shortest way to describe our work. So for the first time, CLOB, the media organization I work for, monitored the parliamentary elections that were on October 4, 2020. So why did we decide to observe the elections in the first place? We knew that due to the pandemic, there will be no international observers in the elections. And we were afraid, we were concerned that there will be a lot of violations at the polling stations. And at that time, actually, we had only like 200 observers whom we coordinated through WhatsApp. But after the October 5 revolution, it's like it became clear that there were still many elections ahead. In subsequent elections, the number of our observers increased to 1,600 and then to 2,800. So our programmers created a system on the website to coordinate the observers. We tried to optimize the system and automate all the tasks. So how does this system work? Basically, it's like its main aim is the coordination of the large number of people. Observers can perform some of the tasks on the website, like, for example, they fill out a registration form, or they take tests, or they report violations at the polling stations. Then, after that, this information is processed by verifiers. On election day, we were able to cover the election in real time with like data straight from the polling stations across the country. And we had a dashboard with data on the course of the elections, which was constantly updated. And advantage of the system is its flexibility. Also, CLOB plans to use the same system in projects where it is necessary to coordinate a large number of people, like teaching kids English, etc. And at the local elections and the referendum, we registered like hundreds of violations, but the most brutal one of them was the rewritten protocols. So after the votes are counted, the results at each polling station are recorded in protocols. The commission signs and puts stamps on this protocol. So this is how the voting results at each polling stations are summed up. So we received like copies of such protocols from more than 600 polling stations across the country. So in the end, we ended up with a small that database of these protocols. So, and the day after the elections, we found out that in some protocols that the Central Election Commission published on its official website, the numbers differ. So we compared each protocol that the observer sent us with the protocols on the CEC website and found out that 1/3 of them had been rewritten. Looking to thousands of protocols on the CEC website, we came to the conclusion that no one in Kyrgyzstan has analyzed this data before. the uniqueness of the system is crowdsourcing. That is, data is collected by a large number of people. Like with 5 or 10 protocols, it will be impossible to trace the pattern of this violation. That is, this system not only help to cover the elections in real time, but also made it possible to investigate massive violations. After the elections, we wrote a series of articles about the elections based on this data. And all this experience made us realize that thousands of observers and the elections themselves generate a large amount of data. And their analysis makes it possible to identify some important social, political phenomena in our country. So in November, we have another election.
Gulzar, you're on mute, I think. Can you unmute yourself?
I'm sorry, I don't know what went wrong.
No, but thanks for your presentation. I wanted to jump in with a question here. It's a really it's an amazing tool you have, crowdsourcing information like this. Can you give us a vision of what other investigative uses you can put it to? What stories do you see in the future using this technique?
Actually, one more thing that we found out with this information, we analyzed the turnout on elections, on each elections in our country and referendums. And then we found out that I'm sorry, I think I had some issue. Wait a second.
No problem.
I was telling that we found out that the introduction of automatic ballot boxes and biometric identification in 2015, after the introduction of these tools, the turnout in elections and referendums in Kyrgyzstan sharply decreased by half. So it means that the elections was rigged in our country, and it gave us like a new angle to look at these things. And we write like a series of articles based on this data, which analyzes the process of elections.
Great. You know, one other thing that occurs to me here too is in my experience, it can be really difficult to get readers and audiences to engage with data, to engage with documents, and to think about, you know, how data journalism works and why it's important. It seems to me that this is one way to get a lot of people involved in the process of data journalism and really understanding what you do. But maybe you can answer for me, and then I'll ask this of our next speaker, Savia, as well. How do you tell really good stories with data, and how do you engage the broader public?
I have to admit that it's actually sometimes it's hard because the whole election thing is kind of boring. But we're trying to use like another way to make it interesting. Like we make some TikToks. And then we have the links to the article. So maybe people, maybe young people in our country will see these TikToks, and it will make this whole data thing more interesting for them. Maybe will be more intriguing. Like, yeah.
I mean, the TikToks sound kind of great, actually. But for me, even, this idea of crowdsourcing is already a great idea because people can understand it. If you're talking to them about trade statistics, sometimes they lose their focus, but people really can see, we go to the poll and someone's there, this happens. So it seems to me a great way to educate your public. If you don't mind, I want to move on and have Savia talk to us about this as well. Savia did an amazing investigation into a very serious and sad topic, which is femicide, the murder of women in Kyrgyzstan. And she was able to prove, I think, an extremely strong case using court records. And also, I think, told a very moving story. So, Savia, could you tell us a bit about your work?
Hi, sure. Thanks. I just have to correct you that we didn't actually use the court records, but we used the criminal news. We analyzed we analyzed the news. Yes, over 5,400,000 of them actually. Right. So just let me briefly tell about the work we actually have done. So can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Good. So the article that we published, it was called "I Would Have Killed Her Anyway," the Klop's investigation of femicide in Kyrgyzstan. But I have to say, it's not really an investigation. It's more of like a research that we did, because the idea behind what we were doing was to sort of understand the patterns that lie behind the women's killings in the country. And just briefly, to those of you who might not know what femicide is, so the femicide is a blend of female and homicide, and is, as you, Aisha, mentioned, literally translated as women's killings. And femicide occurs because of the existence of discrimination, false gender stereotypes, and social roles. And it happens when, well, usually it happens when a woman refuses to obey those stereotypes and follow those social norms, etc. And it evolves around the idea of male supremacy. And basically, there are many criteria of femicide which we can actually apply to the murders, but the most common of them are those killings that that are conducted by the intimate partner, or, for example, when a woman refuses to have sex, or, for example, she is a lesbian or feminist, etc., etc. So there are many criteria which can be applied to classify the murder as femicide. In our case, when we started researching the problem, actually, the biggest challenge was that there is no open data on femicide in the country. There is no statistics on that. The only thing that we were able to inquire from the law enforcement agencies was the number of murder cases where a victim was a woman, and the distribution by gender, the gender distribution of the murderer. And so what we actually see is that in total, during the past 10 years, around 700 of murder cases where victim was woman were registered. And if you look at this chart, you can see that there is obvious disproportion on the distribution of the murderer gender. So the majority of the murders where the victim is woman were conducted by a man, like on average 8 of 10 female murder victims were killed by men. Mm-hmm. And so but it was, of course, it was not sufficient to deeply understand the patterns behind femicide. So we decided that we would analyze the criminal news. And so we scraped, as I said, over 5,400,000 of those criminal news from one of the biggest online media outlets in our country. And to narrow down our database that we obtained, we identified around 80 keywords that are somehow related to the killings of women. For example, a woman was killed, a girl was murdered, husband murdered his wife, etc. And we searched these keywords through our criminal news database and narrowed down our database to nearly 3,000 of criminal news. And that's where the hardest part came, because we had to manually read and analyze every part of that news to understand whether it was news about femicide or not. We had the whole system of criteria. We had the whole, sequence on how we proceed with that. And then it took the enormous amount of time. We did only to analyze those 3,000 of news manually. I think it took us 2 months or something like that. Mm-hmm. So as a result, we were able to identify 300 of femicides, on average from 20 to 30 cases annually during the past 10 years. And that's almost half of the officially registered murders that we obtained from the General Prosecutor Office. And that's very important to understand that that doesn't mean that all other half of the murder cases are not femicide. It just means that we didn't find sufficient information to prove that it was femicide, right? And there were two main conclusions we drew from our analysis. And the first one is that in 3 out of 4 murder cases, a woman knew her murderer, right? And the person who most commonly kill a woman would be her intimate partner, husband, for example, boyfriend or someone like that. And only in 11% of cases, the murderer was a stranger to a woman. So that sort of proved the internationally recognized conclusion about that the most unsafe place for a woman is her own home, right? And here you can see just a couple of sort of motives or explanations of how the murderer would try to justify himself why he would kill her wife, for example. And you can see those are just stupid motives, right? So the woman was murdered because he didn't like how she was cooking very slowly, or he didn't like how she was raising her daughter, or she asked about family budget or something like that. So basically all of those motives are not really sufficient one to murder someone. And the last very important conclusion that we drew is that femicide in Kyrgyzstan is a primary consequence of long-lasting domestic violence. Mm-hmm. In the majority of the cases that we described, a woman was systematically beaten up by her husband, and she eventually, in another fight, she eventually was murdered. And let's say how the government reacts to that is that we had communication with them quite long, and the police officers, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, they do not want to link femicide to the domestic violence. So they separate all of those things. They say, okay, domestic violence is one thing, but the murder is just another thing. And the murder of a woman happens on the exact same way as the murder of a man happens. So they sort of try to distinguish those two things, which is obviously incorrect. And that was our research totally about, that it's not. So it's basically a gender-based hate crime.
So it seems to me that this kind of analysis is really the advantage and the impact of the work you're doing. We have terrible stories in the media regularly about domestic violence, or maybe not in Kyrgyzstan, but in places. But to put it all together and to be able to tell a larger story about society is quite powerful. It sounds like it's almost a different story than kind of individual cases. How did you find telling this story?
Well, that's true. That's actually what data journalism is about, right? So in data journalism, we sort of take one story and try to, using the numbers, using the data, we try to generalize this one story to the whole population or whole region, etc. So that's basically the purpose of the data journalism. That's why I'm so happy that the data journalism in the Kyrgyzstan and Central Asia is developing very rapidly. Because people do not want to hear just one story. Try me. So the audience now is very curious, right? They are becoming more sophisticated, and they want to go deeply into the things and sort of to see the facts. And just one story is not it is a fact, but it's like a small fact. When we use numbers to tell a lot of stories, generalize them, that's becoming more powerful, as you mentioned. That's I agree. And about how to engage people into those stories, that's also a very, very good question for data journalists now, because that's also what data journalists are trying to do, is not to make all of those numbers boring. And that's the field of these experts and researchers who make these researches. But we as journalists sort of try to take this research and to make it more appealing to our audience. And for that reasons, we use the combination of data visualization, combination of human stories, combination of different narratives.
And in a way, it sounds like you are taking sometimes data that exists already, but you're asking questions that really interest people. I mean, for example, they might keep data on murders, but you'll ask a different and maybe more emotional question or powerful question, which is
why?
Yeah, why? And how are women murdered differently than men? You as a journalist maybe can access what people really want to know. You're not just collecting statistics like the officials might be doing.
That's true. Yes.
It's really fascinating. I just want to bring in now. Do we have Yekaterina with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. Yeah, welcome. I just I wanted to introduce you and ask you to speak as well. So, talking about really the potential of data journalism, you've done some extremely successful investigations by actually making use of a couple data sets and the advances that you guys have created, the improved data ecosystem in your region, to find some very surprising and powerful revelations. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Katerina Reznikova. I'm a journalist of CLOP data team, and now I will introduce you our investigative tool, which uses some interesting technologies. So I'd like to share my screen. Okay, do you see this presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. What is our problem? Open data in Kyrgyz Republic is not optimized for investigative journalism. So what does the user see? We have a procurement system for public procurements, and here is a simple table. No information about company founders or top managers, and we can find it only at the government register of Ministry of Justice. So we need to know who awards the procurements, and we decided to use some technologies. How to identify corruption chains? What is corruption chains? We guess there can be tenders where only the related companies took part. The role related means that those companies have the same founders or maybe top managers. But how can we identify them?
Katerina, can I stop you for a second here?
Yeah.
We're seeing both your notes and your presentation. Is there a way you can present the slides and then just read your notes to, try to present the slides so that people can, do you know, can we see right now your notes and the slides?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. If it doesn't work, we'll just continue like this. Don't worry.
Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's perfect.
We have a solution. We present all open data in Kyrgyzstan in the forms of the graph databases, which focus on the relationships. What is the graph database? It's a database that connect some entities of real worlds by the relationship of real worlds. For example, here you see the small piece of our graph database. The green circle is a procurement entity that announced a tender, the light blue circle in the center of the screen, and this tender includes some lots, blue circle on the right side. And here you can see corruption, the first corruption change. Future corruption chain. In this lot participated two companies, Totash and Narbai. They participated in the same procurement lot. And then when we uploaded to this database the data from the Ministry of Justice, and you can see that a company Totash and Narbai was founded by the same person. I think at the right side you can see that the name of founders are taken. So we can found the relationship between the company, between the companies participated in lots and the companies in register of Ministry of Justice by the same text identifier. And we found that those companies took part in a huge amount of lots. And some of these lots, some of this procurement was fake competitive. So in these lots took part only two companies related with each other. And then we found a lot of corruption change in our database, about 2,000 of chains, and some of them was found in a lot that is too expensive for Kyrgyzstan. I don't know how to explain it. And we know that these companies took part in lots with lots amount is about $1 million. It's not so big, but in Kyrgyzstan is impressive. We have more complex anti-fraud algorithms. For example, we can find companies that that was founded by relatives of officials. We uploaded to database the data from declarations, and you can see that some PEP, some official, Abirov Zhenebek Bolotbekovich, probably sibling with the founder of company that took part in the procurement. Why I say probably? Because in our justice registers, our justice Ministry of Justice register, we have no tax identifiers. So it's personal data. So I need to research, to investigate this relationship in real world, why the regular instruments, journalism instruments, by phone calls, by meets with experts, with some issues, and so on. So
it sounds like you've really you accomplished a lot by combining a few data sets and doing cross-analysis of a lot of different open sources in order to see kind of patterns that no one had seen before.
Yes, we can see some chains we haven't seen before, and we can see some market algorithm or some market practices that some corruption practices.
It's a great demonstration of the power of having programmers and having people skilled at analysis or journalists skilled at analysis working together to unearth kind of these insights. And yeah, it's quite impressive.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to ask at these moment if there are questions from the audience that we could for our speakers here. These are some world experts in investigative journalism, so ask away. I'll wait for a little bit, and then if not, I have my own questions. Right, it looks like our audience is a bit shy. So I guess what I'd really like you to speak to, everyone, is just, in a country like Kyrgyzstan, in your region, in your experience, can you tell us about the impact? Oh, hold on. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to let you know that we have a couple of questions in the chat.
We do have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, good. Okay, great. Yeah, so Saida asks, for our speakers, what's the main challenge that you face in using or accessing data, in getting access to data for what you're doing? Maybe Bektur, you can start us off.
I think other speakers know much more about this than me, to be honest.
Excellent. Then
wants to answer?
Yeah, who wants to answer? Let's ask Savia. Can I put you on the spot? What's been the main challenge you face in accessing data to do your investigations?
Sometimes there is no data. That's the biggest challenge. Yeah, that's the biggest challenge. Sometimes you don't have any data and you have to produce the data yourself. And that's what that was our case, because we didn't have any data and we had to create our own database that we would further use. And that's actually, I think that's For our region, I mean, I think that the United States and other Western countries, they have much more data than we here in Central Asia have. And particularly if we are speaking about such countries as Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, they have very poor statistics. I mean, even on this official data level, the quantity and the quality of statistics is very, very poor. In Kyrgyzstan, the situation is better, but also I think because we have a very good collaborative data community here. And we have a lot of projects that advocate for open data. We have the communication with statistical offices, and we actually ask them to provide more and more data, and they do so. And particularly what you've been observing during today's presentation, there are a lot of journalists that actually create tools aimed to produce data, to extract data, etc. So in Kyrgyzstan, it is better. But in the other Central Asian countries, the quality and the quantity of data is very poor. So I think that's actually the biggest challenge.
Well said. I'm actually, that brings me to another question someone's asked. Savia, but also Katerina, Bektur, and Gulzar, everyone actually, could you consider, so we've talked about some really great tools here for doing investigative journalism, but I imagine there's horizons. I imagine there's new tools under development, and there's more up-to-date tools that people are using. Could you talk about that? What are the horizons in tools for data journalists and investigative journalists?
Sorry, by horizons, you mean like what are the next things we're working on?
What's the next thing? Yeah. What are we going to do next? What's the future?
I can share some of the plans that we start doing. So so basically we want to elaborate first of all the stuff that we have already started doing, because it's just the beginning of our path. This is very important probably to understand. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you quite well.
I think my battery is dying or something. It sends me some strange signals into my ear. Anyway, yeah. So for example, even with the analysis of video, we started doing it a year or so ago, maybe even more. But still, it's just the beginning of our journey into that. Because there are still so many much more complex things that we can do with that, which we still haven't done. Yet. We started experimenting with automatically gathering data and automatically producing stories out of it. We recently published like a daily updated story on Glob, which just so far it has been analyzing, the most mentioned people in Kyrgyz media, and then it kind of automatically writes the text about who were the most popular people today, which they were right about them, and so on and so forth. And we want to elaborate it further into creating, the biggest possible database of every more or less significant person in terms of like holding government positions, or every parliament member in the history, and so on. And it will be not like a Wikipedia or something. It will be much more complex because it will contain a lot of automatically generated data, and we could incorporate it into the stories and so on. So probably my explanation is a bit vague, but yeah, we're gonna work more on producing automated content. And it does not mean that we want to get rid of journalists, of course. The thing is, we think that journalists then can further do even more complex, projects. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so basically, I think that's kind of the next step for us in a way.
That sounds fascinating. Wow. Well, we look forward to it. Let me also, I have a question here. Gulzar began to talk about, Gulzar started to talk about this year's election. What are the plans for this year's elections? Gulzara.
thought about the things we're willing to do in these selections. Now, by analyzing the voter lists, now we are trying to check the mass registrations, another common violation in Kyrgyzstan. So, and maybe we'll find out something new. So for now, that's it for now.
Great. So now I'll ask my final questions, and I'd like to bring Altanay back, who opened the panel and who basically was one of the founders of important data school in journalism. What has been the impact of strong data journalism in society in Kyrgyzstan? How has it changed? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. I think it's a nice question for some of what we've been talking about in here the whole hour, and the impact. So I think it's important to outline the role of journalists. So what we are doing as data journalists in Kyrgyzstan is really it's really great, but we need to think about the ways how we can engage the audience in the process as well, how we can tell our stories more efficiently, and how we can reach out to the people who are actually in charge of taking actions, and that's the biggest challenge of journalism, because we as a journalist, our roles are limited to the stories we're telling, and to the stories, to the corruption we're uncovering, to the investigations we're uncovering. And here it's really important that the whole system, democratic system, works as well, because we are, as a journalist, we're telling the stories, and then for instance, people, they need to act on the stories as well. So it's important that everything develops together, because we are interdependent on each other. And yeah, we're limited with our stories, and it's it's based on people and on the communities, on civil society, how strong it is to demand action from the government.
Well said. We're coming towards the close, but I'm wondering if any of our other speakers would like to answer that question and tell us about how your strong investigations have made changes in your society.
May I maybe add something? So last year, for the first time ever, finally, someone from Kyrgyzstan was included into the Global Magnitsky Act sanction by the US. Finally, it was our former deputy chief of our customs service, who was one of the main people we investigated, in the series with OTCRP. And I mean, for us, another important next step is to start collaborating even more with journalists, not only from Kyrgyzstan, but from other countries too. Because one of the main enemies that we have is the organized crime, definitely, and they are organized. That's why they're called organized crime. And unfortunately, civil society and journalists have not been that well organized across borders as they are. They can traffic drugs from Colombia to Italy, which is crazy. How the hell do they do that? And so we need to learn, basically, not to traffic drugs, of course, but to collaborate on the same kind of crazy level across borders, to become stronger, and then and this was a very important outcome of our investigations, that finally some big country like the US paid attention to a criminal in the US in Kyrgyzstan, and sanctioned him. And we hope that further stories like this would happen as the outcome of what we do. Because again, this would be beneficial to other countries too, especially to those where they hide their money. That's one thing. Another important problem here in Kyrgyzstan is poverty, which is crazy. And poverty is the foundation of corruption and the organized crime. It's really easier to manipulate poor people. So what we are trying to do starting from this year is to use the same techniques that we used in the elections in the education. You know, if we can organize a crowdsourcing with several thousand people, we would love to use the same technique to organize education for several thousand, to maybe make an input into having, you know, richer people in Kyrgyzstan, basically. And you know, if people have more income in Kyrgyzstan, it will be so much harder to buy their votes, so much harder to involve them in criminal gangs or something. And that will be like a huge game changer, you know, and that's what I'm dreaming of.
Can I add just a small remark, please, Aisha? Can you hear me? Okay, just a small...
Yeah, we all can.
Good. Just a small remark. I just wanted to stress that to producing the impact, it's a long process. I mean, it's not that happens very fast. And given the fact that, let's say, data journalism has been developing in the country for, like, I don't know, for 2 or 3 years, there are many, many years ahead after which we can actually say about the long-lasting or sustainable impact. And that's, I mean, that's normal, that's okay. But without, like, developing the data journalism, that there would definitely be no impact. So we just have to be patient and just do our job quite professionally and good. And I think, like, in a decade, we will see the impact. Just be patient.
That's well, yeah. Congratulations to all of you for your impressive work, and thanks for sharing with us today and helping to educate our community a bit on what you do and how you think about these problems. I feel like I should wrap up this panel like a good moderator. We've been going for an hour, so I'm sure your fans aren't satisfied and they're going to write you all very enthusiastic emails. I just have to thank you. It's been really a great pleasure hosting this. I've learned a lot, and you do really impressive work. Thanks for taking your time for us.
For inviting.
Thank you
very much, all. It was a pleasure to have you all and have this very important conversation together. Let's stay in touch and build up further together. Thank you very much to all of you, dear experts, and the participants for having the time to join us today. Thank you.
Ciao.
Aisha,
Thank you.
big thank you to you.
Nice.
Bye-bye.